Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Films and Stuff podcast. I'm Easy Ethan, joined by most valuable Pete. Hey, Pete, what's up?
Not much, Easy. How are you?
Everything is great. I've lifted that joke from our streamer skip last week where the character's name was Noise, spelled Nwazeze, which I still think is one of the most subtle, funny, hardcore rap jokes that I think a very, very small number of viewers caught.
Yeah.
In any case, we are here back with the weekly stream or skip segment. I always introduce, you always explain the rules. So with that introduction done, let me turn it over to you and tell our current and new listeners what stream or skip is all about.
All right. So Ethan and I have prepared lists of TV shows for each other to watch. Every week, we randomly assign each other one of those series. We have to watch at least 2 episodes if it's a series or 30 minutes if it's a feature-length program. And on that basis, we determine if that show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
Could not have done it better myself. Without further ado, well, actually, let's have a little bit of further ado. I think that we had a very, very, very good week the past 2 weeks, right? If you look back kind of the beginning of December, let's say, I had Day of the Jackal on Peacock, which we both gave a must subscribe. I had The Franchise on Max, which we both said was a solid mooch.
Yep.
There were some redeeming qualities about that. You had Monsters on Netflix that you gave a must subscribe. I gave a mooch, still positive. And now this week, we both have something on Netflix. And spoiler alert, I think we both really, I don't know if we've got a word for this, but when we watch each other's shows as well, we cross-pollinated or we double-checked our work. What is it
Right.
called? Quality control. We did a little QC on each other. And I think one of the very few weeks in over 200 episodes that we have both given must subscribes to what we watched, and we gave must subscribes to what the other person watched, right?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of 4 for 4, right? That's not unprecedented, but certainly it's high praise for what we've got this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me kick it off.
Kick it off.
I watched a show called Bank Under Siege.
Just by that title, I felt like you were going to give it a must subscribe just based on that title.
Based on the title alone.
Yeah.
So let me give you a quick synopsis. Bank Under Siege is the Spanish language drama. Now, I call it a drama, but in reality, it's a biopic because it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
And like very recent biopics of the last year, 2 years, it's not a biopic about a single person, but it's about an event. It's based on a true story. It's based in the early 80s. It takes place in 1981 in Barcelona, a couple weeks after the failed coup by the Spanish Civil Guard. And what happens is it opens with a very civilized assault on the central bank of Barcelona.
Yep.
It's a bank robbery. All of the masked robbers are there, and similar to Reservoir Dogs, where the robbers were named with colors, here the robbers are named with numbers. So 1 through 10 or 12 or whatever the numbers.
Yep.
So that's the first side of the story. The second side of the story focuses on a new journalist. She's a female journalist in crime reporting, one of the few females in crime reporting. She is the daughter of a famous journalist who was murdered during some event, probably during the coup. And so she garners a lot of sympathy, but she doesn't want to talk about it because obviously it's still a sore subject for her.
Is that part true, by the way? Have you cross-checked to see how much of this is true? Because
I haven't been able to cross-check how much of this particular part is true.
Yeah.
I know that the bank robbery stuff is relatively true, but I don't know about the
first day of work
dramatization and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is true.
Yeah.
She comes in and on her first day, she's able to get the scoop on this bank robbery. Literally her first day on the job, she gets the scoop on the bank robbery because somebody calls the newspaper. No one picks up the phone. She picks up the phone and she gets the scoop.
Yeah.
So it looks like the robbers are going after safe deposit boxes and money. They have requested a plane to go to Argentina, but more importantly, they've also demanded for the release of the guy, the general or the captain who was behind the coup 3 weeks ago.
How many episodes are in this season?
So there's only 5 episodes.
Whoa. Have you watched all 5? Did you binge
I
it?
haven't, and I got sidetracked because halfway through the 3rd episode, I decided to take a break to watch your series.
I told you how show my show is. Yeah. I watched 1 episode based on the same thing. You told me how good yours is.
Yeah.
So I switched over and I watched the first episode of yours, and I agree, it's fantastic. And 2 things that caught me were, one, how close this is to another Netflix bank heist, well, called Money Heist, right? La Casa de Papel. I mean, both are Spanish language, both are intricate, bank heist shows. I was struck by how similar those are. As you mentioned, in Money Heist, everyone has names, Tokyo, the professor,
the city,
Rio, Nairobi. Here it's numero uno, numero dos, numero tres, which to be honest, I feel like is much more complicated to remember. But in any case, Money Heist, we focused on kind of the investigator, right? Raquel.
Yeah.
And here we focus more on, at least initially, we focused more on the reporter.
That's right.
But I only watched 1 episode, but I'm all in. Like I didn't know that there were only 5. That's pretty short, but if it is a biopic, you can't extend it too much.
Yeah, and I appreciate that they don't expend it too much. I think that's also the hallmark of European shows in general. We see that with British TV shows all the time, is they don't tend to stick to that formula, which is every series needs to be 22 episodes long, or it needs to be 12 episodes or 10 episodes. They're kind of like, we need to tell the story. If it takes 3 episodes or if it takes 17 episodes, we take whatever the number is and that's it. We don't pad it anymore. Yeah. And I think most of the streamers in the US are starting to get that now too, right? So that's why Black Doves, which is still a British show, is only also 6 episodes.
Yeah. The disappointing thing about Black Doves, I thought, was it's kind of like The Weekend. Once you're already done with like 2 episodes and you're like, I love this, I can't get enough, you start to feel sad because like the end is already coming. You're like, oh no, only 3 more. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, it's like waking up on like a Sunday morning and you're like,
oh God, in 24 hours I'll be back at the office.
Yeah. Why can't you just enjoy it? Why can't you just agree that you've got a full day of the weekend left? Or why can't you just enjoy 4 more episodes? But that's the angst that I feel when something is only 6. It's like, oh man, like it's already ending, even though I've got a couple hours to go yet.
Right. So yeah, anyway, the 2nd episode, by the way, is just a flashback of the coup. And it looks like the bank robber who's in charge, number 1, he may be one of the guys who was a part of the coup. We're still not sure who these guys are. I haven't seen the entire series, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think that's probably a red herring. I think it's just a standard bank heist. In any case, the storytelling is super tight. It's super suspenseful, great acting. The set design, there are times where you can kind of tell that you're on like a set. The exterior shot of the central bank and the street, it kind of felt like a really fancy play, but it did feel like you were on a stage, not in the real world.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I don't expect them to spend millions and upon millions of euros to make this series. I thought this was fantastic. I really am looking forward to finishing the rest of it, and probably actually this weekend, once we're done with this recording, I'll probably finish this as well as your show. So yeah, my rating, this is a must subscribe.
I agree, and then I want to make a point. So I also agree from the 1 episode I've seen, A Bank Under Siege, amazing title. is that this is also a must subscribe. I'm super excited to watch the last 4. What I wanted to say was there's something comforting, I feel, and this isn't just like my age and nostalgia showing through. I think there's something comforting about shows that are made in the 80s and 90s because of the absence of the telephone, or
Oh
the mobile.
yeah.
I feel like, I mean, now everything is so mobile driven that, from your location to the messaging. And I feel like it's really not cool to have a TV show or a movie where there's like these direct shots of people's phones showing messages, showing a WhatsApp stream, showing them typing. It just seems, I know it's a part of storytelling in the modern age that you cannot avoid because it's such a part of your life. But I feel like it's just disappointing when most of my life is spent with my head down looking at my phone. And then I go to watch a movie and I'm watching someone else with their head down looking at their phone. And I guess my way of making the point is that this movie occurs in the 80s, and it's so funny to watch movies in the 80s. I mean, yes, that's kind of like half a century ago, which is a different issue
Bonkers to think about.
Yeah. But I mean, the idea that people just called hard lines, the idea that there was a phone booth, the idea that people put like a note and then the prime minister got the note through a fax, the idea that it wasn't easy to just make this a Michael Bay movie where there's drones everywhere and taking infrared of, all the different, technology devices. And it basically becomes like this technology war. There's something really calming about watching a good old fashioned heist movie that's not overwhelmed by technology.
Right.
We saw the same thing in Money Heist, right? That was a good heist, and it wasn't bogged down by everyone sending messages to each other, everybody calling each other on their phone, someone stealing a phone, or the geolocation of the phone and downloading this app, and is it encrypted or not encrypted, and so forth, right? It was just comforting to have a good old fashioned like focus on the drilling and the heisting itself. So that is Bank Under Siege. I did not know it was a foreign language film when I gave it to you. As you rightly mentioned, I was assigned also on Netflix a show called Black Doves, starring Keira Knightley.
Oh, absolutely.
In a role we have not seen her in before. Let me go through it. We meet Keira Knightley, and she is the close to perfect or optimal wife for I guess he is the Minister of Defense in the
That's
UK.
Right.
So her name is Helen Webb. She's married to a very British man named Wallace Webb, who is the Secretary of Defense. We meet her, and it's, a few days before Christmas in the UK. So there are holiday parties. And we see that, again, she is kind of the perfect package. She is cooking. She is baking. She is sponsoring a charity. She is the doting mother of 2 perfect children and a great wife. And she's got it all locked up, right?
Yeah.
Until we find out she doesn't. And it leaks very slowly. So first, we find out that she is having an affair. And then we find out that she's got some type of, I don't want to say an alter ego. She's got kind of like a second life that she's living, although we don't know the full extent of it. And then through a series of flashbacks, we find out that she was a very intelligent, but kind of down on her luck young woman who had, by association with some family members who ran into some problems with the law, difficulty getting a serious job that was commiserate, with her intelligence and her skills. She was identified then by this kind of freelance espionage group
Yeah.
which makes me think a little bit of the Amazon spy thriller. What is that? Amazon,
Citadel.
right? It's a little bit like Citadel, right?
Yeah.
They're not the CIA.
They're like an NGO, right? They're like a
Yeah,
non-governmental organization.
exactly. They're a little bit like Citadel, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they are this. They're the CIA without being the CIA, right? They're covert agents, and basically their MO, their modus operandi, is to say, hey, we're going to basically create a team of spies, most of which seem to be women. I don't think there's any men, but the female spies are called Black Doves, and they get them to infiltrate with influential people. And it seems like initially they're just there to just kind of like seduce men and try to get some secrets. But Keira Knightley's character, whether planned or not, actually kind of falls in love with Wallace Webb, who was not at that time a Secretary of Defense, but he was a politician or wannabe politician. And she actually decided, hey, I'm going to stick around with him. And it turned out to be a mutually beneficial relationship, right? I mean, she kind of actually fell into love with him, liked the lifestyle, liked being a mother, liked having a family. And at the same time, she was able to carry out her responsibility for this clandestine Black Dove organization as her husband continued to advance within the British government. She had more and more access to his confidential information, top secret information,
That's right.
spy stuff, right? So it was very symbiotic. Then we flip around a little bit, and we understand that the man that she was having an affair with has been murdered, and she sincerely believed that she was in love with him. And she goes on a little bit of a, shall we say, an independent mission to try to find out who has killed her lover and why. And then it opens up to a dramatic spy thriller with a lot of different characters and a whodunit and some different twists and turns, which take place over the next kind of like 4 to 5 episodes. That part, I think, was actually, I would say, like quite legitimate. It seemed like the stakes were adequately high. It seemed overall to make sense. I kind of enjoyed it. What did you think of Keira Knightley in this role? I feel like you've got a small crush on Keira Knightley.
Who doesn't?
I don't know if I do anymore.
I don't know. I've never seen, and maybe this is because I haven't seen too many Keira Knightley shows or movies, but I can't think of any of her roles where she played anything reasonably action centric.
100%.
And I'm not saying she's an action star in this show, but in that opening episode, there is a fight sequence and she holds her own, right, against 2 assassins.
Yeah.
Of course, she does need to get saved because she is more of the spy, whereas Ben Whishaw is more of the muscle, as it were.
Yeah.
So for me, it felt like this was a little new for her. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying this is, I can't think of any show I've watched with her doing something like this.
I agree. I mean, I think Keira Knightley for me is known as kind of the waifish beauty, right? I mean, you think of her in, I mean, definitely, I think of her as kind of the breakout of, Pride and Prejudice.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
She was in Atonement. Love Actually, I think, was her probably breakout, right? I mean, Love Actually, plays Juliet. I mean, that's 20 years ago, but I mean, that was for me, at least, the role I think of her. I mean, definitely she seemed to have trained hard, and I thought that she did a superb job in the show. Here's my frustration / hot take. Keira Knightley is not just a waifish character. She is legitimately small.
Right.
She is 5'6". She is like 60 kg. She is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a large woman, right?
Yeah.
And we find her, and we've seen this with a number of shows. And while I don't want this at all to come across misogynistic, I am all for the empowerment of women. And we've seen some great women fighters, right? But someone like Keira Knightley, not really believable as a fighter. Keira Knightley is very, very, very small. And again, she wasn't necessarily known as like growing up on, I mean, even in the show, she's not depicted as growing up, like on the hard streets of kind of like Northern Ireland or something.
Exactly.
She was applying for kind of like temp jobs. And then she got this role in the Black Doves, let's say 8 years ago, based on kind of like the age of her children, right?
Right.
I mean, 8 years ago, they gave her a little bit of training for sure, but it's not like on a day-to-day basis. She is in the gym, like in the army or in the military service, where she's waking up at 6, doing sit-ups and push-ups and lifting weights, doing a boxing routine, practicing with a knife, practicing with guns, right? I mean, she is
exactly,
for the most of her time, a mother and a wife. It's possible, yes, she's getting an hour or two to sneak away and do a little bit of training, but I felt that's a little bit, although I thought she carried it out fantastically, it's believable in the show. She's never going to be able to like hand-to-hand combat. Like, remember, this assassin broke into her house, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how anyone didn't wake up, but putting that to the side, there's no way I believe that this big guy who's a full-time assassin is going to be out hand-to-hand combated by Keira Knightley, who's been doing this for 6 to 8 years, has given birth to 2 children, is very, very small, and is dedicating the majority of her time to being a mother, a wife, socialite, a charity founder, and not, practicing all day on stuff like this.
Right.
So that's me being overly critical about it. But in terms of, did I believe that she was pulling it off during the show? Absolutely. She did it very, very well. I have to give her a lot of credit. She handled a gun like she knew how to handle a gun. The fight sequences, definitely she trained. And I think at least for a lot of women, especially we've seen this with Allison Janney, who in real life is like 60 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
I think part of the appeal is that historically, unfairly, women who hit their 40s, the only role that they were no longer the bombshell, right? So they only got the role kind of like as first the wife and then like the grandmother, right?
Right.
Like the roles were just kind of limited once you kind of got to age 40. On the good side, I think it's very, very empowering that there's now more roles, right? Allison Janney can say, hey, I'm going to be an ex-CIA agent and I'm going to take down the whole town. And Keira Knightley can say, yes, I'm going to do hand-to-hand combat. I'll be an assassin. J-Lo can say, I don't know what J-Lo does. I'm going to get in this weird robot and on a different planet and somehow muck everything up, right? Like, I don't know. Right?
Bunch of nonsense, but yes.
Yeah. So I do appreciate that there are now an expanded universe of roles for women. And I thought Keira Knightley was fantastic. And I liked the story in this. I liked Wallace. I thought he was good. I liked the idea that it was a little bit of international intrigue. And everyone, both the Chinese, the Americans, and the British, all seemed to be kind of reasonable in their positions and how they approached, this catastrophic death of the ambassador. I thought the whole thing kind of made sense.
Before we get too much into that, what did you think of Ben Wishaw's character? For those of you who need a reminder, you will most likely know him as Q from the modern James Bond movies.
Yeah. I have to say, when I first saw him in this role, I would not have said I would have cast him as such.
Right.
But the more I watched the show, I really kind of liked his character. He wasn't off-putting at all. And I guess I kind of came to the realization that not every triggerman or assassin is going to be, Pierce Brosnan. Not everyone's going to be Daniel Craig. They're not all going to be these big, hulking, physically fit, suave assassins, right? Like
Right.
that world just doesn't exist. The assassins you get are generally,
Normal people.
yeah, kind of normal people, not necessarily down on their luck, but they've got their own, issues, and they're probably physically a little bit undescriptive that can fit in and not, stand out, right? I mean, Pierce Brosnan during his heyday, when he walks into a restaurant, everyone notices, that handsome Irish man, right? So, I mean, I thought actually the more I watched the show, the more I thought that he was very, very well cast. And I thought that also his arc was, I think there was a little bit too much with his boyfriend, Michael. But generally, I thought that he had a good arc. Like he had a code. He, grappled a little bit with, the fact that he was an assassin. He had a little bit of loyalty, but he was also kind of a loner. I thought that he was a very, very believable character in that role. Huh?
Right.
Wasn't like this perfect, assassin, like we saw the Jackal, right?
Yeah.
Who's getting these crazy shots from, over a kilometer away. He wasn't like this perfect robotic assassin. And he wasn't, a guy who was just like so much bigger and stronger and better at hand-to-hand combat. He was, kind of what you would expect to be a trigger man, right? I mean, he went up to people, he shot him in the back of the head. He was exactly what I thought that character would be. So I thought it was very, very well cast.
Speaking of which, Day of the Jackal season 2 also greenlit.
Another character that initially, Eddie Redmayne, I would not have initially thought that he would be a jackal, but he turned out to be very, very, and I think we mentioned this when we reviewed the show. I thought he's an exceptional jackal. I think he's not a great,
whatever his alter ego was. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole storyline, and I think that storyline, to be honest, is complicated by the Spanish element to it, right? If he would have found a British wife, maybe it would be a little bit more believable. But the idea that, he found the Spanish wife, I thought made that relationship more difficult to kind of like identify with, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, Jackal, very, very similar and very well cast. But Black Doves, who else I thought was fantastically cast? The handler.
Yeah, I was just about to say the old lady, right?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Lancashire. I've not seen her in anything else, but I thought she was a fantastic character.
I thought she was very believable.
Yeah, she was so believable in terms of being nondescript,
Exactly. Someone you would not think of as a part of that kind of world.
Yeah. Just very shrewd, did all of her work, with the telephone and with meetings. Yeah, I thought she was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this show. More than I thought I would. And as I told you, I thought the best comparison to this show was The Diplomat.
So yeah, you mentioned this. Walk me through that. Where do you see the comparisons to The Diplomat?
I thought the comparisons were the overall style.
Okay.
Maybe the pace. I mean, in terms of The Diplomat, there's much less violence, but I thought that the conversations in The Diplomat, the dialogue is very, very tight.
Yeah. And
I thought that the dialogue also in Black Doves is very, very tight. I thought that the plots were a little bit complicated. Like they weren't these very simple plots. It's not just, oh, Russia's got a nuclear weapon, we have to disarm it, right? Someone stole plutonium, uranium, whatever, and we have to get it back. The plots were a little bit more clever, well thought through. You could imagine that there's a writer's room both for Black Doves and for The Diplomat that kind of walked through it and say, okay, but now what would happen? Oh, is that realistic? But what if we would have it like this? Should this person know? Is that realistic? And I thought that both the plots were both believable, and they were complicated enough that you couldn't automatically like see through them and say, oh, well, I know how this is going to end, right? They're going to get the bomb, and with a couple seconds left, they're going to disarm it and so forth, right? I thought that these were very good plots. And I thought that the main character which is Keira Knightley in Black Doves and Felicity in The Diplomat. Both characters are the leads, but they're not actually the only character. It's kind of the supporting characters are equally important, right? You mentioned Ben Whishaw, Wallace, Reed. There's many other characters in Black Doves and also in The Diplomat that are equally important to the story. And I think sometimes you have a series and there's the main character, and then there's kind of like the silly or goofy sidekick, and then there's someone else, but it's really the main character who's in every scene, who's carrying the whole thing. And I thought that one of the similarities between Black Doves and The Diplomat was the ability to distance themselves a little bit from the main character and still develop that character, but not make it all about them and only about them. And I have to say, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure we could come up with some other similarities, but I felt if you liked one, you would probably like the other. If you didn't like one, most likely you wouldn't like the other.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't know if I would necessarily connect the two, probably because I'm not thinking of it as anything beyond what the plots are. Because that way they're quite different, right? One is a little bit more comedic. The Diplomat, I mean, obviously is not a comedy, but there are a lot more comedic elements to it.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that. I mean, especially with her husband, right? There's a lot of, I mean, that's a more complicated marriage, right? Whereas, Keira Knightley and Wallace, I mean, that marriage is, even though he's a Secretary of Defense, I mean, that's a much more traditional type, relationship and marriage, how they treat each other.
But I understand what you're saying. It does make sense what you're saying.
So there will be a season 2 of this.
There will be a season 2. It got greenlit just, I think yesterday or the day before.
Not surprised. I'm really excited. I have to say, I really, really enjoyed it. I don't know if I would have picked it up on Netflix had it not been assigned to me.
I think based on the cover art, I don't think I would have either. But there's two things. One, since it came out very recently, it's been in my top 10 list.
Yeah.
And two, there was a lot of buzz around it.
There is a lot of buzz around it. But good for Keira Knightley, getting a new role and getting a different role, right?
Yeah. Or something completely out of left field. I just, again, no disrespect to Keira Knightley, but this is not a role I would have seen for her.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm still not fully convinced, I have to say. I mean, I love her as an actress. I love the story and I love her character. But I mean, again, I'm not really convinced. Let me put it this way. Her acting is convincing, but I still have a problem seeing Keira Knightley as someone who is able to engage in like meaningful hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
Just because of her physical size, I thought she was more powerful as a spy. The way that she manipulates people, I thought was exceptional. Like she did a great job. And I think it was very subtle that when she talks to people, she always gives them kind of like a kind smile, but then her words are kind of like, okay, well, off you go, right? Like she knows how to end conversations. She knows how to not disclose information. She knows how to get information. Like she was exceptional at that. And I felt like that was very, very believable,
Right.
I felt it's just kind of less believable for her to be creeping around, someone's apartment. Two people come in and she's, swinging a knife and, grabbing them and flipping them over on their back and so forth. That's not what I see.
Yeah. I know what you
mean. In any case, dude, we had two very good shows. I had Black Doves, which I give a must subscribe. I believe that you do as well.
Yeah.
You had Bank Under Siege. You've given a must subscribe. I think I'm going to get there. I haven't rated it yet, only because I saw one episode, but definitely I'm still in on those episodes. Do you think we can keep it going for the end of the year?
That is a very good question, and we'll find out probably after the new year. So just administratively wise, we're now in the last week of December. We've all got family commitments. We've all got travel commitments, So it's doubtful that we're going to record for at least the next couple weeks. But when we come back, you will have watched a show on Paramount Plus called SEAL Team.
I love the idea of this.
I think this is right up your alley as well.
Yep.
And I will be also on Paramount watching the newest Taylor Sheridan show.
Oh my
I mean, I don't
gosh.
know why they're bothering calling it Paramount Plus. It should just be called Star Trek and Taylor Sheridan Plus.
Yeah.
I'll be watching the new Taylor Sheridan show called Landman.
I'm definitely going to watch this with you. I've heard a lot about it with Billy Bob.
I mean, I'm glad we rolled it for this week, but I've heard too much about this. It's all over my YouTube recommendations and all over my Paramount Plus recommendations.
What are your expectations?
I think it's going to be another Yellowstone / Tulsa King, except now based in Texas.
But I mean, do you think you're going to give it a must subscribe? Like just based on what you know about Taylor Sheridan and...
I think it's either going to be a strong mooch or a must subscribe.
Yeah. I don't see there's any way where you're going to come back and be like, eh. I mean, what has Billy Bob Thornton been in where you haven't really loved him?
Yeah, it's been a long time since I can think of a show.
To put it another way, when we were first introduced to Billy Bob Thornton as the plaything of Angelina Jolie, did we really believe that there would be a universe where he would be a super respected and acclaimed actor that we actually really enjoyed watching? I mean, if there were betting odds on that, I would have expected Billy Bob Thornton to run kind of the way of Charlie Sheen,
Okay.
or like Tommy Lee, like this kind of one-time attached, to the hottest woman in Hollywood, and then kind of goes off on a bunch of benders, comes back with some type of, reality show, and that's a little bit tawdry and just kind of like bounces around in a little bit of obscurity. If that's, I think when I was first introduced to Billy Bob, that's what I would have thought where his career would have gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, I have to say, like, he's a quite well-respected actor,
things
we've seen him in The Judge, Armageddon, Don't Make Me Cry. I mean, almost everything, right? He's been fantastic.
And he's one of those guys that doesn't fit a necessary typecast. Like, he looks like he could be a bad guy, but he's also played a good guy. He's a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, he's so hard to pull off that he's actually kind of the badass asshole who has the heart of gold. That's one of the hardest tricks, I think, to pull off, is to look and act as though you're this robotic, mechanical, uncaring, selfish jerk, but everyone knows that you are deep down
a
the
good
guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Angelina Jolie is an ambassador, I guess, for UN, and we've seen her in less than actually I think we've seen Billy Bob.
Well, yeah. She's also got a lot of
drama.
Yeah, to say the least.
Okay. Well, I think we're both going to like Landmen. I think we're both going to like SEAL Team. If I had to guess, I would think that SEAL Team is going to be that comfort show similar to Vikings.
Yeah.
Where you can put it on in the background. You can enjoy it. It's not winning any Academy Awards. It's not changing your life, but you really kind of enjoy it and get into it. I feel like Landman is going to, I hope, be a little bit better than Yellowstone. I thought Yellowstone was fantastic for the ideation and exposing us to a new place, but I thought it very quickly kind of got a little bit bogged down in too much vigilante violence.
Right.
And a very small universe of the Duttons basically controlling everything in some way in the state,
Yeah.
All right, Pete, shout out our YouTube and social media creds so everyone can tell us if they loved Black Doves and Bank Under Siege as much as we did.
All right. Tweet at us at F&S Podcast, DM us on Films and Stuff Podcast. And as always, the best thing you can do, like this video, leave a comment below, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell.
Could not have said it better myself. Wishing all of our listeners happy holidays, happy New Year's. We will be back at the turn of the year 2025 with our breakdown of SEAL Team and Landman.
In the meantime, thank you very much, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.